ESPN FC's Gab Marcotti sat down with Carlo Ancelotti, the Bayern Munich manager. Is actually over in Vancouver at the moment, Francis. That's where he got married actually a couple of years ago. Sat down with him, and one of the things he said about Major League Soccer, because he enjoys going to the Whitecaps games, is that it's demotivating the structure of MLS with no promotion and relegation. Do you agree with Carlo Ancelotti?
To a certain extent, I do. I think that it's an American system that doesn't just hold it specifically to soccer. I know that he's talked a lot about how he pays attention to other sports as well. And one sport that I have in mind is the Philadelphia 76ers in the NBA. It's like there is a severe lack of motivation until you have a player that kind of gets everyone back on board. They've got Joel Embiid in now who's telling everyone, get behind the process. And that's sometimes what it takes to motivate a team. But if you don't have that, then what do you have to play for? You're a losing franchise. You don't have the backing. You're relying on young players, draft picks to push you forward. But if there was that relegation promotion system, players literally have to play for survival, Kev. How many times have we been drawn to the screens in the Premier League as we watch a Sunderland claw like they did last year, a Leicester claw to try and get any sort of point? That's something that you cannot buy. That's something that you cannot teach. That is just simply playing for your life. And I think that when it comes down to it, it's going to motivate a player beyond what you can see at face value. So I do understand where Ancelotti's coming from. And I know this has been a topic of conversation when it comes to American soccer, and that's why it's not growing. I think there's bigger reasons than that. We've talked about it before. I think there's a problem with youth. There's a problem with pay to play. But this does play into it as well. It's all about motivating teams to play for every single point, every single game. And I think that, unfortunately, in MLS, this does cause a little bit of a problem when it comes down to these games that maybe don't mean as much when they're not playing to try and make it to the playoffs.
To me, Carlo Ancelotti is spot on. Absolutely correct. It is demotivating. Is North American soccer ready for promotion relegation right now, though? I don't think it is, Francis. I think several steps need to happen soon for that to happen. And it could happen, honestly, in the next few years. And it would take 5 to 10 years at least before there's a set system in place and it's actually working and flowing well with maybe 80 teams and let's say 4 different divisions. I think that'd be marvelous for the US. But what he said is spot on. And I'll tell you why, because I worked for the Chicago Fire for several years in Major League Soccer. And the team would get to the start of September and there'd be 2 months to go over the last few years in MLS when I worked for the team, and the games would mean absolutely nothing. Eliminated from playoff competition, the players would be just seeing out the rest of the year. If there were relegation, there'd be something on the line for those players and the owner to be more ambitious. And I just think that promotion relegation in time will be a wonderful thing, but I don't think it's ready just now. There's big obstacles, by the way. The owners have invested hundreds of millions right now. The new franchises, the likes of Atlanta and Minnesota coming in this year, over $100 million the owners have invested in this single entity structure. So you're not just going to introduce promotion relegation like this, because they've invested in this structure so they can't be relegated. So there'd be serious compensation that would have to happen in order for this to take place. But I believe Mr. Ancelotti is spot on. It is demotivating.
I think there's a little bit of a catch-22, isn't it, Kev? Is that you want to get more funding behind the game, right? So therefore, you want to be able to expand the teams that are in the lower divisions, the ones that I have had experience both playing and kind of looking into. And those teams do want to push up into the MLS and push up into the higher level, but it's all about the money. It's all about whether or not they can maintain the same level of income in order to play in the MLS. But in order to get that, you need to add more competitiveness to overall American soccer. And in adding competitiveness, relegation will add that, because it will make, as you mentioned, every single game mean something. Every game will have its own sort of story that people will tune in to watch. You'll get more television rights. You'll get more people coming to play in this country if there was more competitiveness. You look at the teams that are strengthening each year. You just mentioned it yourself, like Toronto. These are teams that are getting better players because competition is prominent there. Teams like the Seattle Sounders are always going to attract players because they have competition, because they push for the playoffs. But teams like you mentioned, like Chicago Fire, yeah, they might have a good start to the season, but as soon as it dies out, no one wants to go and play for Chicago because they're just simply waiting for the season to end.
And it's reflected in the attendances as well. We could get into discussion on this for a few hours, but we have to let it go for now and get the thoughts of you at home on this one. Carlo Ancelotti says it's demotivating, the format of Major League Soccer with no promotion relegation. Do you agree with the Bayern Munich coach? Let us know right here on 120 Sports.